Donald Trump running out of time. He now has just 27 days left in his presidency. And Trump, he's been using that time to pardon as many people as he possibly can. We're going to get into some of the more controversial political pardons, that in our next segment. But he also pardoned 4 Americans that were responsible for a horrifically brutal attack in Iraq. Now, they massacred 14 innocent Iraqis in a public square, including 2 children, and injuring 17 others. The men, they worked for Blackwater, ostensibly a private security company, but really the men were more like mercenaries. Blackwater, it was founded and run by Eric Prince, who just happens to be the brother of Trump Education Secretary Betsy DeVos. Now, the 4 guards, they were part of a convoy that opened fire without orders or provocation with machine guns, grenade launchers, and a sniper. They targeted a crowd of unarmed people in a Baghdad square. 3 of the men sentenced to 30 years in prison, the other given a life sentence. Even career military vets supported this prosecution and the sentences. And in Baghdad, a number of people who survived that attack and loved ones of people who were killed, they remain. Now, the pardons, they took them back to that horrific day all over again.
I say to him, your decision, you are going to have to face God on this, SALMAN says. You did not fulfill justice. You pardoned the criminals and the killers. The blood of the dead and wounded is on your hands.
For a reaction to that and more, I want to bring in our guest, Joe Sestak. Joe, a retired Rear Admiral, he served in the U.S. Navy from 1974 to 2005. He later served as a Democratic congressman from Pennsylvania from 2007 to 2011, and after that, he ran for president. Admiral, as always, I appreciate the time, and, you know, in a politically scientific term, this is just crazy, what we're seeing happening in the final throes of the Trump presidency. Do you shake your head, or are you more than just, you know, dismayed? Are you really concerned about the damage, the permanent damage he's leaving on the way out the door?
There is some damage that's going to be done by this pardoning, the clemency that he is giving to certain individuals. And I say that with due respect, that the one place in this nation where a man is above the law is the president when he uses his ability to pardon or to commute a sentence. It's the one exception we have, and that's why it's dangerous, because you can't have, for example, where he pardoned the 4 of the 5 Blackwater guards who had actually done a significant crime against humanity. By unprovoked, they massacred civilians overseas. Now, what would a country say if we don't hold them accountable for that, and we ask to have an American sent back to us to be tried, where we don't hold people accountable who break the rule of law? But while it's dangerous, this pardon, Richard, it's also necessary. And we need to get through this phase, because somehow our founders recognized that a set of laws, the first time it's ever been done in history when they founded America, wasn't ever going to give perfection of a good society. And they decided that they would make an exception for injustice, and they would also make an exception, as Hamilton once said, Alexander Hamilton, to restore the tranquility of the nation. A very unique thing to recognize that there are times where a person can be above the law, in that one instance to do it. And that's why, above all else, this nation relies upon a president of character to make sure that that pardon power is used of necessity, not dangerously.
Admiral, I want to stay on the Blackwater situation because, sure, we've had controversial pardons from prior administrations, but I heard today the military investigators who worked that crime scene. I heard from fathers who lost their children, people who lost their spouses that day. There were women and children in there. And to hear the people that were personally invested in bringing that case to trial and then to the convictions, including even a life sentence, the outrage they had, because as you said, crime against humanity. And it took me back to what we saw with this president previously with the Navy SEALs, with the courageous SEALs who came forward and talked about Gallagher and how what he did was not in keeping with the traditions of the Navy, and that they put their careers on the line only to be, have their knees taken out from them by this president. That there's a concern that goes beyond just this isolated incident, as gruesome as it is. We're putting people in danger that are on the ground in Iraq right now for retribution. And going forward, who's going to trust us, to your point? I mean, this has consequences beyond just a miscarriage of justice.
It does. And you use rightfully the Gallagher example as another one of clemency being given to someone wrongly. And in that case, men and women who actually defend America, defend the rule of law, have broken it. And then to forgive that, it hurts and debases our moral standing in this world. Look, I could repeat countless times where I was somewhere, for example, once in an Arab country, and some officers got underway from us from that Arab nation. And then they left the ship. And the day they left the ship, one of them said, "Captain, can I ask you something? Why do you treat your enlisted men," and we had just men on that ship at the time, "as equal to you?" I said, "They say yes or no, sir. I mean, we just treat them with respect." He said, "I had to ask because we don't." We have a certain understanding that those words you'd use, trust, I used respect, but overall it's accountability, that we are who we say we are, and we will hold those who go against our laws or international laws accountable. That's what's happened in this instance militarily, and puts our men and women in the future in harm's way, because others would say, if America does it, why can't we?
This all happening, of course, not in a vacuum. The president following through on a threat, vetoing the defense reauthorization bill. Traditionally, and you know this from both your service and then when you were working on the Hill, this is a largely apolitical piece of legislation. And it's not just, moving around the deck chairs. This creates more than uncertainty. I mean, it is really unhealthy what the president did here, and again, for seemingly completely illogical reasons.
Yes, and I think the two to most speak about is probably his disagreement with the provision in the law, the Defense Authorization Bill, that all names of Confederate generals will be moved from bases. I mean, again, it has to do with who we are. It took us a long time to get there, but we're there as a nation, as a people. But number two was that he did say, I'm going to veto this if we do not remove that provision that lets those type of network companies of Facebook and others, that if they post something and it defames someone, they're not liable. It's not like the Washington Post or the Houston Chronicle. You can get sued if you do something like that, but they don't. And they make a good business out of doing it. They have algorithms that raise up these ads, even if they're sometimes hateful and don't do a good job on controlling them. I understand that in that point, the president's probably right to change that. But to do it in the middle of a defense bill that has within it the largest change in cybersecurity for our nation, just after SolarWinds happened, where the Russians hacked into, for example, the energy department that actually controls our nuclear stockpile. And for him to veto that over something that should not be dealt with in a defense bill, I think is wrong to the service of national security.
Talk about the world from the perspective of national security that Joe Biden will inherit right now. Obviously, the last 4 years have fractured a lot of our alliances, how much people can count on us certainly has been frayed, but it seemingly is a much more dangerous place with Russia been largely given a pass, if not even abetted the past 4 years, even the most recent cyber attacks. I know you wrote a piece recently about with the China Seas and what Biden inherits. What would you be most concerned about if you were the president, and what would you prioritize as things you got to deal with right away?
The number one is the issue that you brought up. It's the new domain of warfare, and it happens every day, cyberspace. right now we have the Defense Science Board saying that there is not one major U.S. military system that we can rely upon that could not be hacked or could not be polluted with malware, because we bought commercial items that were made, many of them overseas. So you probably read the controversial report where servers in Apple, servers that are actually in Amazon, ones that actually worked CIA drones, ones on Aegis ships, had placed in them a chip in order to be able to do damage later on. This is a whole different framework. So yes, am I concerned about Mr. Putin? Yes. His danger physically, kinetically, is the near abroad, that area of former Eastern Europe or former republics. And we can maintain that with NATO as we rebuild with our allies, as you mentioned, Richard. But am I concerned about Kim? Yes. But remember, Kim was within seconds of stealing billions of dollars from the Federal Reserve through cyberspace hacking. And suddenly they found a few years ago a misspelled word and they got suspicious. But China, above all, in this new domain of cyberspace, that's what I'm concerned about. Because right now, today, because of their ability to take down systems in the military, shattering, splintering all the networks where we pass data, no longer are ships and planes the targets. It's take down all the data by malware, however you want to do it, and all of a sudden you're dumb, deaf, and blind.
I do appreciate, as always, Admiral, the time, and have great holidays, all right, and a safe one at that.
Same to you. Thanks, Richard.
When we come back, we're going to get back into the pardons, and they went far beyond just those controversial 4 Blackwater security folks who got pardoned. In addition, you have corrupt politicians. You have people who worked for Trump on both the campaign and also pleaded guilty to serious crimes, all being pardoned. Many people saying this is opportunism and political payback gone awry. We'll get into that and much more after this.